value goes up, your taxes, your property taxes will automatically go up.
Say again?
That's right. We all believe that if the value goes up, that our taxes are going to go up, because they always do. Just for you to think about, I'm going to take 2 minutes here. There's 3 things that impact your property taxes: value, exemptions, and tax rate. Value is, by law, supposed to be market value, or something very close to it. You have no control over that. You can protest your valuation, and you might get an adjustment from the appraisal review board, but you really have no control over your value, because that's supposed to be market driven. Exemptions, those are set by the state and law, and you have no control to that. The one thing that everybody has more influence on than anything is the tax rate. But everybody always focuses on the value. We hear about it all the time in the tax office. Now the value's gone up too high and my taxes are going to go up. And I'm like, you know, every time we focus on the value, we're giving local elected officials a free ride. We're giving them a pass, because local governments have conditioned us to believe that the problem is value. The problem's not the value, folks. The problem is the tax rate. Anyway, we need to start thinking in terms of that tax rate, because we have more influence over that than anything. And it means engaging our local government, our city council, our school board, commissioners court. How many times have you heard an elected official say, well, we held the line on taxes, but your taxes went up? They didn't hold the line on anything. And if they put it like that, they lied. Now, if they told you, well, we held the line on the tax rate, then yeah, they were telling you the truth. But they will always, and it's, I don't know, it's something almost endemic with local elected officials. They will give you this shrug of the shoulders. Well, you know, there's nothing I can do about your value. And they're right. But they can do everything about the taxes you pay. The people that control the amount of taxes you pay is not the appraisal district, it's your local elected officials. And you need to engage those people and get them to adjust the tax rate to keep your taxes down. That's my 2-minute speech.
There we go. Yeah, that makes sense to me. You're hired.
Yeah.
You're hired. Fantastic. So I think it looks like everybody's gone through the line here. We're going to go ahead and get started. Ron will walk through kind of some of the etiquette. We'll also have a Q&A portion after some of the introductions of the candidates, and they'll talk about their vision and such. The line for that will be Ronnie in the red at the very back. He'll have a microphone, so if you have questions, you already know what they are, feel free to line up. But with that, Ron, a big round of applause for Ron. Thanks so much for your time.
First, I want to, there's Tim. If David Wylie and Tim O'Hare would come join me up here. And before we start, y'all go ahead and have a seat. Y'all saw some of the public officials, because they're also candidates, but I want to also point out that Judge Tim Minikos is here. Tim? We have 2 representatives to the SREC. From Senate 10 is Mary Easterly. From Senate District 9 is Shelley Pritchard. T.F.R. Deputy District Director Darrell Dowd. And 2 very special people. We would not be having this debate tonight except our current chair, decided not to run again. She has done a fabulous job for Tarrant County Republican Party in the back. And she has been well served by her vice chair, Brandon Moore. Now, we have just a few rules. I've already covered them with the candidates. There's no drinking, smoking, cussing, or spitting on the floor. And they have promised to be respectful and courteous to each other and to the moderator. I want to ask the same of all of you, because the way this is going to work is instead of prepared questions, all of you get asked the questions. Brevity matters in events like this. So, you have to ask your question in 30 seconds. And if you can't formulate your question in 30 seconds, you don't know how to ask a question. And if you're a man, that tells me you've never been married. Right, Doreen? But be brief with your questions. Most important of all, remember that we want to hear the views of these two gentlemen. They can argue with each other, but you cannot argue with them until this is over. You're not here to debate their answers, okay? So you ask the question, allow them the courtesy of answering that question, okay? And then we're going to turn the mic over to the next person. So be respectful with these candidates, be respectful to your poor moderator, and be respectful to each other, because there's probably people here that don't disagree or don't always agree with each other, and that's fine. This is the United States of America. So with that, gentlemen, if you're ready, we're going to get started. We're going to have 2-minute opening statements. We flip the coin, and the first opening statement will be Mr. O'Hare.
Thank you, Ron, and good evening, everybody. I am Tim O'Hare, and it is my pleasure to be here with you this evening. This is a great group. This is a legendary group, and I'm glad to meet so many of you. A lot of you I know, but it is my pleasure to be here. Thank you for being here, David. And a lot of times when you get in these things, you start talking about what you're going to do, what your accomplishments are, and we'll have plenty of time to get into that. But for now, I just kind of want you to know who I am. And to tell you who I am, the first person that I need to introduce is the most important person in the world to me, and that's my wife, Kristen. So, Kristen, would you stand and say hi to everybody? This picture that was up here before we came up was a picture that was taken of me before we got married. And so she came to my first forum when I was running for mayor of Farmers Branch, and all I wanted to do was impress her. And anything I said, she said, "Oh, that's great, that's great." Now, fast forward, I guess it's 7 years later, and she's telling me how to say everything. So, but she's right, and I've learned that. So we have 3 young kids. Our oldest is Katie, she is 4. Our middle one is Emily, she is 3. And our youngest is Juliana, she is 14 months, or she will be in a week. You might have noticed that's all girl names. And so, yes, we have a lot of girls in the house. We have 2 dogs that are boys to kind of make up for that. We moved to South Lake in 2014. We bought land in South Lake in 2011, and we moved here because this is where we wanted to raise our family. We prayed about it. We went all over the Metroplex, and we kept coming back to Tarrant County and to South Lake. This is where we want to live, raise our kids, establish roots. We didn't move here for political reasons. In fact, I walked away from everybody in Dallas knowing I could have run for just about anything I wanted to. This is where we wanted to be, and I look forward to sharing my vision for the Tarrant County GOP with you tonight. Thank you.
You and Susan a chance to get set up here. I'm good. Okay. I'm David Wylie, and I'm running for the position of chairman of the Tarrant County Republican Party. And I've been working with the county party for about 30 years, doing precinct chair work, election judge work, getting out there, walking the neighborhoods, building the databases, and making the walk list for precinct chairs. Many of you are. I've sent y'all walk lists. Over time, I've been involved in the state convention on the credentials committee in 2008, 2010. Worked to co-chair the registration of the last 2 state conventions that were here in Fort Worth, and put together just the best executed conventions that we've had in a long time. Doing all the work that I've done with the party, the opportunity to step forward and work to bring everybody together as the county chair is a great opportunity for me. We have a number of different groups of people, areas of thought, and in Tarrant County, you know, the folks here in this room don't think the same as the folks, you know, south of town or whatever. But getting out there and getting the best that everybody has to contribute, getting people to walk side by side through the neighborhoods and bring out the candidates and turn out the vote for the number one most important thing that a party does, and that's win elections. There's a lot of details that go into that. But at the end of the day, if we're not winning elections, our voices are not being heard. We've all got to go out there and work together. And I want to build a party where we can all work together. Thank you.
All right, it's time for questions, and the microphone is in the back. So all of you prepare your questions. I'm going to ask the first one, so don't be too big a rush. And that is, I'm an elected official, Republican elected official. What is the proper relationship and attitude that the county party should have towards Republican elected officials? And this one goes to David.
The party, in the case of county-wide elected officials who are actually party officials, your councilmen and your school board members are not party elected officials, and so they're different. But the primary thing that the Republican Party needs to do is to come up with good candidates, develop good candidates, and then give them the support that they need to get elected. Now, in a primary where everybody's a good candidate because you've got your friend and other people have got their friend, the proper perspective of the county party is not to choose or give an advantage to one over another. It's to make all the resources of the party available to all the candidates. But then once our candidates are in place, we got to put everything we can behind them. And if they're not performing the best, then maybe you take them aside and you say, you got to give it the program. People are not happy about this, but you support them.
So the number one job, bar none, of the Republican Party chairman or chairwoman is to get Republicans elected. That's number one. Now, if I asked every table to come up with a Republican that's in Tarrant County that you don't like, we would get a lot of answers. But the number one thing that a chairman does is elect Republican candidates. That's number one. One of the things that's really caught me by surprise is the amount of factions that exist inside the Tarrant County Republican Party. And what I think you need in a chairman is somebody that knows how to bring people together. And I have done that as an elected official. I've done that in running a company for 14 years. I've done it as a nonprofit president of the Christian Legal Society, the Metroplex chapter. I have a track record of doing that. And we're not going to get everybody on the same page, but we've got to stick together because that makes our party stronger and that helps us to keep Tarrant County red.
Okay, the lady may now ask her question.
What are your plans to help the Tarrant County party raise money?
That's a great question. I said the number one thing that a chairman or chairwoman does is win elections. The number two thing is raise money. And so we have a great group of people that run the Lincoln Reagan Dinner led by Mona Bailey. They've done an excellent job with the Lincoln Reagan Dinner. What I want to do is explore the possibility of adding an additional fundraiser. And whether we do that as a barbecue where we bring in a live band, whether we do it as a prayer breakfast on the National Day of Prayer, I'm talking to people, precinct chairs, elected officials, and trying to find out how we can add a new fundraiser so we don't step on the toes or lose money from the people that give at the Lincoln Reagan dinner. And I'm going to have an idea of what I want to do after I talk to more people, but that's one of the things that I want to look at.
Okay, the Lincoln Day dinner is always our big fundraiser, and it has done good. We could maybe come up with an additional one called the Reagan dinner. That'd be your second one. But Tarrant County has always been a wealth of support for candidates and for the party. There's been a lot of money in Tarrant County in the past, and for whatever reason, we haven't done as good of a job of bringing that in. We need to look back to where we've been and the people who have built this party, get them back involved. That's one of the factions. We need to look to the growth of the new people that are in the party. And we need to set aside some of those old ideas and embrace the new ones, embrace where we've been, and get everybody back involved again. I think that one of the things we face with fundraising is making people feel like they're going to have the ability to participate in the party. And that's what we can do.
Thank you. Before you ask that question, I overlooked someone earlier. Lee Collins with Senator Connie Burton is here. Wanted to acknowledge her. All right, go right ahead.
As a party leader, what are you planning to do to hold allegedly Republican judges who are using CPS to attack and destroy families accountable to the party platform?
Oh, yeah.
Holding people accountable to the party platform has always been kind of a misnomer. There's not a whole lot of family law in the party platform, so to apply it to how CPS is acting would be, you missed the mark there a little bit. But until we get to where we form the party platform, before we nominate our candidates, you're never going to be able to get anybody to agree for something that hasn't even been decided yet. They'll all tell you in the primary that they'll support the platform, but if we came up with telling them that everyone had to wear green, they wouldn't be able to do that. We need to move our processes around and have some fundamental changes with the way that our primaries and our state convention cycles go. And that's the way we can get more adherence to the platform by our elected officials, that show them what we're thinking before they promise to support it.
So I think a county chairman has 4 essentials that they've got to be able to do. Number 1 is raise money. Number 1 is know how to win elections. Number 2 is know how to deal with the media. And then number 4 is know how to lead. Either you've run an organization or you've been a leader at some point or another. Those are the 4 essentials. Okay, and that's not answering your question, but I'm going to get to that. I think the 5th thing, and it's something that I think I would bring to the table if you elect me as your county chairman, is you influence the people who are in office. Can you build relationships with people to steer them in the right direction when you think they get off track? And that's an important part of what an effective county chairman ought to be able to do, is go to the elected officials who are not, whether it's judges, state reps, state senators, whatever the case may be, go to them and advocate on behalf of Tarrant County residents and say, you're going the wrong direction, this is not what we want, and push them to go the direction you want them to go.
Yes, sir.
This is kind of a question of, I guess, generalization answer, but our school boards seem like there's so many of them that are corrupt now. And kind of like the White House, Washington. And I've always wondered, my whole life, is why is, in our property tax, sometimes 80% of it goes to the school? Can you explain that to me?
You're asking the moderator a question. the taxation and the limits on taxation are set by the legislature. That's number one. The reason that your school taxes are higher than any other entity is you're normally going to pay for 5. You know, the county, the city, JPS, the Tarrant County College, and your school board. Some of you will also pay for the water district. But it has to do with, for many, many years, that was the only income for school districts, was that property tax. Some before the state ever paid in. Did that answer your question? No?
So this isn't exactly your question, but I think it touches on it. So one of the things that I want to do if I'm the county chairman is I want to make sure every Republican that goes to vote in a school board election or a municipal election knows the voting records of the candidates. And lots of people say, well, those races are nonpartisan. Well, here's the deal. I think we have figured out when Democrats go to vote in school board elections and city council elections, they know who the Democrats are. People in this room probably know who the Republican candidates are, but for the general masses, they don't. And we need to change that. We need to make sure, because we all know today's school board member or city council member is tomorrow's state representative or state senator or who is running against Greg Abbott for governor, and you know what I mean there. So we've got to make sure we elect good, strong conservatives at school board level and municipal level.
And one thing I would like to throw in here is that we have had some movements in the past where we believe so much in our Republican message, our party message, that I would like to push for making all the elections, the school board elections, the city elections, whatever they are, partisan. It's real easy to be a Republican voter around here because we're the only ones that put people on the ballot in Tarrant County. There's not a whole bunch of hotly contested Democrat races out there, except for a couple neighborhoods, but everybody votes in the Republican primary, and so they get labeled Republicans. If your elected officials really care to agree with what you have to say, then they would tell you that they agree with your Republican policies. And so it shouldn't be a big question about if we have partisan races on those local levels. I think it would greatly help everybody understand.
Go ahead.
Yes, I've spoken to the gentleman in red tie earlier about this, but something I addressed last year. I want to get the all politicians. I don't care what office you're in, whether you're a dog catcher. I want term limits, and I want the ability. Texas is one of the few states that doesn't have a recall election, and when you call one of these elected officials, well, they don't think they're crazy if you disagree with them. But I want to know where you're standing on recall elections.
Thank you. Okay, I'm glad you went that way. Recall elections are great. If an elected official is performing in a way that's upsetting people, and they can go out and go through the process of getting the petitions, and I'm not real good at it. I've never done one, so I don't know what all the process is. But, having the ability to stand up and say, you've done wrong, I think that's a constitutionally protected right that people should have, is to pull them out of office, throw the bones out.
So to address your question, I think there's two approaches to this. One is the one you talked about. The problem with it is the numbers that, sometimes 15% of the people can recall someone. If something like that were put in place, you'd have Republicans statewide running for office every 15 minutes. So that's where you could run into an issue. Let me tell you something that I did when I was in Farmers Branch. As I was walking out the door, I put on the ballot term limits. And I drafted the ordinance, and there wasn't even a campaign about it. We just put it out there for people to vote on. I think term limits is appropriate for just about every office, tax assessor excluded. But I think it's appropriate for just about every office. And when we put it on the ballot, it passed 82 to 18. I think that's something people would get behind in large numbers.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, there was a And Dave, you mentioned that, that the party platform doesn't have anything pertaining to CPS, and you're correct on that. And Mr. O'Hare, you had mentioned earlier that, our job is to, or your job would be to get Republicans elected. And my question is, are you willing to stand behind those same Republicans that refuse to adhere to our party platform? That say one thing to get elected, but when they get in office, they just, oh, I'm a Democrat now. Or at least act like one. I mean, what is your, yeah, do you support the Republicans that do not adhere to the platform?
So, great question, and there's two things I want to mention about that. So, number one, as the Republican Party chairman, your job is to support Republicans. I said that, I think I made that clear. As a general rule, I don't plan to endorse in primaries. Now, I say as a general rule, there is an exception to every rule. And for me, there is a clear number one litmus test, and that is pro-life. That is my number one, by far, always has been. If somebody is not pro-life, not only would I not support them, I would endorse their opponent in a primary. But when it came time to run against a Democrat, would I support the Republican over the Democrat? Yes, I would.
And of course, I'm very pro-life myself. But the platform has many issues in it. And the primary is not always our biggest battle. What we have is we have legislative sessions in which bills are introduced in the House by people who are already elected, already represent us. And whether it's a public rail system going in, or how we handle an immigration issue, or any of the rest of the items that are in the platform, education funding, we have 2/3 of the House of Representatives, and we can't get votes on issues that are in our platform. And so as county chair, if you call out a member and you say, why didn't you support one of our platform issues? I don't think that's being negative to the party. In the primary, you do want to be fair and give everybody a chance, but after the primary is over, we got to hold them accountable.
Sorry.
I'm former military. I've got black and white ways of looking at things with a gray as a possibility. I've already heard one thing this evening I wasn't particularly fond of. Well, if they're not following our platform, then maybe we should. I don't want a maybe. We've had a lot of politicians come up amongst our group here and ask us to vote for them. The one question I always have that is never answered, why should we vote for you? Okay? They usually say, well, I've stood up for the Democrat. Good, then you're not getting my vote. I'm tired of having politicians that will just stand up to the Democrats. I don't know how many of us here, but I'm one that wants politicians to push back against Democrats. And if we
There you go.
You said a while ago, then maybe we should know. I want your commitment. If you're going to be the one, either of you, I want your commitment that you will do something to set that individual back into place, and if not, start some kind of proceedings to get rid of that individual. Because you said our whole goal is to get Republicans elected. On a national basis, we've seen that 12 years ago. We've seen that 10 years ago. We saw it 8 years ago and 4 years ago. If you're going to elect the wrong people, what good is it? What are you going to do to keep these people in line? And that is your job, to keep them in line. If not, what can you do to get rid of them?
Sense.
Okay. So in the case of it, you have an elected official who's down there in Austin and they're working against our principles. They're working against what we want done. And that's where I went into at the end of my last statement, that if it is an issue that they're voting on and it's wrong, we need to stand up and say that's not how we do it. And if it's one of our neighborhood elected state reps and they're going against something that is specifically in the platform there. The issue of speaker is not in the platform, it's not a platform issue, but it's been one of the most contentious. But if it's for funding on the border or not doing what they need to do according to the platform, we need to bring that to their attention. There have been people out in northern Tarrant County, we've had a complete turnover in the last 6 years up there because the people that were there were for expanding local option gas taxes and those kind of things, and the people said no. And we have turned them over, and we do have new people.
So as Republican Party chairman, you represent all the factions. You got to try to bring them all together. That's not always easy. I think the best way to accomplish what you're talking about, and this is something that I would absolutely do if I was elected, is you try to recruit good candidates to replace the ones that you don't want. And you bring them in, you train them, you teach them how to do things. So as a candidate, I've won 2 elections and I've managed campaigns for quite a few others. And so far, we've won every election that I've been in the last 12 years. So I can bring that to the table, and I also know how to raise money. When I ran for office, I raised more money than my opponent, and everybody whose campaign I managed, I raised more money than them. And that's what it takes to beat some of these incumbents that you don't want. You gotta have the money, and I know how to do that.
Yes, ma'am.
Surveys today show that the millennials are very conservative, that part of the issue is that they have a certain perception of the Republican Party. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of times the Republican candidates are not going to the campuses, they're not speaking with younger adults. So what are you going to do if you are elected to this office to ensure that younger people become active in the Republican Party?
So that's a great question. My wife and I were talking about this on the way over. And just to give you a little background on my wife, she served as a precinct chair in Denton County before we met. She was on the Denton County Executive Committee Board of Directors, and she started or co-founded with someone else, Denton County Young Republicans. What they do in Denton County is every peanut festival, rattlesnake festival, tiddlywinks festival, you name it, the Republican Party has a booth or a table, and you make yourself known in the community. You go everywhere. And so what I would do is go to where the young people are, and it brings up a different topic, which you didn't ask about, but I'll talk about now. We also have to reach out to minorities. We have to grow the party. We know the way the demographics are going in Texas. You do not compromise your principles, you reach out to them. And traditionally, the way Republicans reach out to minorities is, when it's election season, they show up to the NAACP meeting or they show up to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce meeting. It has to be continuous, ongoing, all the time.
I've heard a lot lately about the millennials. They're obviously a large group as the baby boomers used to be. And I think back when, at the beginning of the 80s, when I was part of YR's out at the Coors plant. And the reason we went to the Coors plant was for the YR's meeting, you know. But I stuck with the Republican Party. I stuck with that. And a couple of my friends today were with the 15 or 20 of us that were all there then. But generally, honestly, people who get involved as youngsters, 10% of them stay involved, and the rest of them fade away. What we have to do as a party is we have to make ourselves the kind of party that people want to stay involved with and reach out to as many of them as we can and be there for them as we go forward, knowing that a good portion of them are going to fade away, but we have to be there for them.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. O'Hare was a terrific mayor for Farmers Branch, and he was able to work well with the city council and organize a grassroots movement. How would you, both of you, organize a grassroots movement with this large of an area?
Well, I have been organizing
between 300 and 400 precinct chairs across the county for the last 20 years. That is our grassroots. The precinct chairs are the cream of the grassroots, the flowers. And if you can use that network of people all across the county, you can give them the information about which households vote Republican. They can get the information for issues, they can get the information for candidates out in that distributed manner. Working with the precinct chairs is the most important way for us to move issues through the county, whether it's candidates or things on bond packages or anything. That's mainly what got that JPS out there, was to push the precinct chairs.
So the way you motivate people is good communication. Absolutely, the precinct chairs are vitally important to what goes on in Tarrant County, but so are the TFRW women, and so are the Republican Club leaders, and there's so many people that you can reach out to get to motivate. So some of you probably listened last week to the Mark Davis show. I guest host for Mark Davis and John David Wells on 660 AM The Answer. And somebody came to me and said, do you know what's going on in Keller ISD? And of course, they were talking about adding the transgender language to the discrimination policy. So I put it on the air and talked to tens of thousands of people about it and did a small part to help bring people out. There are many ways to get people involved and excited. You've got to communicate and reach out to as many people as you can to bring as many numbers as possible. It's all about numbers.
Mr. Shai.
I don't know how many years ago, 20 years ago or so, Texas was faced with one of the biggest battles that they've ever faced. And Tarrant County led in that regard. And our problem was we had all of the doctors leaving Texas, and it was due to a bunch of personal trial lawyers. Now, I don't want to paint a big brush, but they were the problems. I mean, we got rid of them, and thank God that the problem went away. The doctors, how would you, Tim, being a personal injury trial lawyer, separate the wheat from the chaff from those bad guys? Chop, chop, chop.
Can you phrase that in a way that David Wylie can also answer the question?
We'll see. Well, no, I can't, because he's not a trial lawyer.
That's right.
Tim is the only trial lawyer that's running. Personal injury trial lawyer.
David will try and...
Okay, so I make a living in these two ways. I'm an attorney, and I'm also a real estate investor and developer. So as a lawyer, my firm absolutely handles personal injury cases. We also handle business law. We also handle wills and trusts, estate planning, and probate. Don't confuse me with the people you see on television with the commercials that talk about how tough and smart they are. The reason that I do what I do, and the reason why good people like me exist, is because insurance companies repeatedly rip people off. Now, I wish that wasn't the case, but I bet if I asked for a show of hands, I'd find at least half the room that feels like insurance companies have mistreated them or wrongfully withheld money from them. That's why I exist. That's why we do what we do in that regard, and I'm proud of the work that we do.
Don, you referred to about 20 years ago, we had a crisis in front of us, and what Republican Party politics did at that point in time is they recognized the crisis. I was going to conventions then, and we were working on issues and tort reform. Y'all remember that? The legislature brought in tort reform. They did it on an impetus from that platform we keep talking about, and we got that job done. And as a result, the environment today is much better than it was. Doctors the insurance is not as overwhelming, and their building practices here more than they ever have. That's what activism on the part of the party can do to address the problem. And whatever next year's problem is, we'll address that as a party.
When I lived in Florida, they had a switch party. How's that sound to you guys up here? Call the Democrats and say, hey, why don't you switch and join us? I think it might be a good idea. I never hear anybody talk about it, but they did it down there.
Well, let's ask the question again. Are you saying, I'm not going to say what you're saying.
Have a party and invite the Democrats over to switch over to the Republican Party.
Oh.
They did it down there, they can do it here too.
Well, and what I was going to say, I keep going back to the way it used to be, because that's what we did. In the early 90s, here in Tarrant County, we didn't have any elected Republican officials. You know, Texas was Democrat. And we were just catching up on that Reagan wave from the 80s. But we got together with a number of folks, Tom Wilder and Steve Holleran and some folks. We got a candidate recruitment committee in which we went out and we interviewed people who would be interested in getting on the ballot. We talked to a lot of elected officials, and we had many of them come over from the Democrat side to the Republican side. And within 10 years, we had every elected office countywide as Republican. Some of those were switched from Democrat, and some of those we had to weed out, because not everybody who wants to switch over to your side agrees with you. They just like to win.
Charlie Garrett, for sure.
Okay, so if the question was, how do you get people to switch over to the Republican side? So I think very clearly Republican ideas are the best ideas. So we keep seeing the nation pushed farther and farther to the left, and we keep seeing more and more chaos. The good news is people are waking up, and people are figuring it out. And groups like this are being formed, and groups like the Northeast Tarrant Party are growing like weeds. So that's the positive. I think the real problem, and if you ask me how do I address this as county chair, that's the $24 million question. The real problem is we elect Republicans, we send them to Washington in the House or in the Senate, and then they continue to act like Democrats. And they just expand government and they just spend in different ways. So we absolutely need to hold elected officials accountable. And the way you do that is by putting pressure on them through Republican clubs, or putting pressure on them through the executive committee, or privately sitting down and saying, I'm coming after you if you don't change your ways.
Ms. Dowd.
To bring it back to the present for a little bit, very shortly we're going to have people sending out people, knocking on doors. I'd like to know how you're going to train those people and how they approach the people who answer the doors. Thank you.
I understand why Republicans are angry about the direction of the country. I am angry about the direction of the country. I mean, who would have ever thought we would be sitting here when you pray and you believe in limited government and you believe in low taxes, that you're an extremist. But we're fighting something that is big and, quite frankly, evil in the media. And it is a force in the United States, make no mistake about it. What we have got to do is not come across to people who are not Republicans as so angry. Now, some people hear that and they say, oh, you're against the Tea Party. Well, hey, I was Tea Party before they formed Tea Party, and you can look at my record in Farmers Branch and see that. But what wins people over is people that are positive, people that are upbeat, people that are excited and that are energetic. That's what they have to see from Republicans. What also wins people over is standing up and saying enough is enough and pounding your fist. So You gotta be able to do both. It depends on who the group is you're talking to.
Back to the question a little bit. If you take it from a position of how will we help those block walkers in communicating? It's a brave new world. You know, the technologies that are out there on your iPhone, you can get a walk list and you can record all the little responses. But, you know, you put one of those in the hands of somebody who's not used to using it, and it's just like a rock. So if the county party was to hold training sessions in which they work with people who've done this before, and they come up with good campaigns, and they make the county headquarters available, and they do the training they need to do, along with the technologies where they fit, and the data that we have of who to go knock the doors of, that's the way we can get our message out. And as I said earlier, if every precinct chair was able to go out there with a team of people and work those neighborhoods, we can be very effective.
Yes, sir.
I have a question, this is for both of you. Tarrant County is a pretty tight group of people, and the precinct chairs are a tight group of people. And we stand for the conservative party, of course. My question, if you are elected to this position, either one of you, is that door gonna remain open for all of us? Because Jen over here has done a great job of keeping that door open. And I want to know, I want to make sure that that door is going to be open, because until she took over this spot, I didn't feel like I was welcome there. So I want to know, I want to hear you say that door is going to stay open, and that whatever has happened in the past stays in the past, and we're going to be tighter together now that you're in there.
One thing I've always liked to say is that that door was closed to me in many different cases. I've never been one of the cool kids, if you may. You know, different county chairs in the past, they didn't want me hanging around for one reason or another. For about 10 years, I had hair down my back end, you know. I didn't look the mold or whatever. The one thing I kept doing was I kept trying. And I kept making my database available, kept working with the precinct chairs, kept participating. And I do understand what it's like for an entire group of people to feel like they've been shut out. And that's why in this last cycle, as the chairman of the SD10 convention, we took all of those factions, if you may, and we gave them an opportunity to participate. And I'd like to take that same success that we had in that most successful of SD10 conventions, where we've got a pretty ugly history of what's went on in the past, and put that on steroids and do it countywide. Yes, everybody will be there. Everybody will be included.
Mark, if I'm elected county chairman, everyone will always have a voice in the Republican Party. I will listen to everyone. I may not always agree, and I'll tell you why I don't agree. The other thing you'll get from me is you'll get honest answers. You won't get political answers. You won't get me trying to spin it or me trying to schmooze you. I'll tell you where I stand or why I think something is wrong. But you will always have an open door with me. You'll always have you'll have my cell phone number. You'll have my home phone number, and I'm going to be accessible to everyone. So there is an element of our party that feels left out. I'm not sure I agree that they are, but they feel left out, and that's the downtown crowd, okay? We need everyone to be part of our party. We are stronger together. We can elect more people. We can stay red, and I want to raise, we do great at getting votes, for net votes for the state. I want to raise our level of influence, where we're sending people from Tarrant County to Austin, and where we have more of a national voice. I want people to say, hey, what is Tarrant County doing? We need to follow their lead.
But before you ask that question, I want to let both candidates know, 1 minute isn't enough sometimes. Before we go to closing statements, each of these candidates will have 1 minute to do a follow-up on any question that's been asked here tonight. So you might be thinking about that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I want to follow up on what Ms. Val said when she asked the question about the training, and you alluded to the people underneath. I live in an area on the west side of Fort Worth with a precinct chairman who never walks our neighborhood. I've known him for 40 years. We have nothing. I think the precinct chairman are the ones who need the training because some of them are failing. You know who you are. There are good ones and there are ones who just get too busy. They don't do it on purpose. The other thing I want to say is we all need to quit playing victim. I wasn't welcome. Well, how did you approach Jim? How did you approach that office? I've never felt unwelcome.
So now I'm going to have to spend the entirety of his answer trying to figure out which question I want to answer, because that was the question I wanted to answer in my minute. So I want to kind of answer Beryl's question. I gave some statements, but I didn't answer the whole thing. So how are you going to train people? It is repetitive. You cannot have a training session and then that's it, now go out and do it. You keep doing it, and you keep training, and you keep offering training, and you go get the best and the brightest, the people that have done it and been most successful. And it's easy to look at the numbers. Look at the precinct chairs that have the best turnout. Look at the precinct chairs that do the most work, and bring them in to help train people. So training is important, and any good leader has to motivate the people that he is responsible for working with. And to do that, you have to have vision, you have to have executive experience, but you also have to be willing to listen. And if you listen to people and understand what works in other counties, what works in other states, you can bring it to Tarrant County to make us all better.
So I'm trying to think back to the question. And it inferred that I might be whining a little bit. I can tell you that one of the reasons that somebody today feels like they're being excluded is because that is kind of how it's always been. One group gets in power and they have their people who agree with them that are willing to help them out and hang around. And the people that don't agree with them, they just kind of quit helping. And then they feel disenfranchised. They're not part of it. Not necessarily because they were locked out, they just aren't made to feel like they're part of it. And that's where I feel we can grow and we can get together and everybody can feel like what they have to contribute is part of the whole. And that's where leadership comes in, and honestly, that's what I've done, but I think that's what we're hearing from both of us tonight, that we can work together and bring as many people in and make as strong of a party as possible.
Yes, sir.
Now that I've taken a deep breath and I'm not as up there as I was a while ago, I attended the Red State gathering a couple weeks ago. And right now, the general acceptance is that there's not that much difference between Republicans and Democrats. Well, what everybody, almost everybody per person at the Red State gathering, they were referring to themselves as conservatives and Republican later. The only ones that referred to as Republican were the candidates that appeared before us and told us, what their agenda was. Do you associate yourself more with the conservative party or the Republican party? And yes, I know it's confusing, but there is a difference now. And there has been for probably 15 years. There's a difference between Republicans and conservatives. Because Republicans are so close to Democrats right now, it's not even funny.
I know what the conditions, the ideas that make up the Republicans are. I know what it was like when I was a kid growing up and you had Ronald Reagan telling us about opportunity and the government getting out of your way. And anytime that you hear conservative, put your hands on your wallet because they're lying to you, okay? Conservative is the most overused word there is out there these days. If somebody's just going to sit there and talk about I'm more conservative than you. I'm so conservative, I'm right with Till the Hunt. I can make a good case for you why the Confederate battle flag was about economic suppression of the North and the South. But nobody wants to hear that. But that's good conservative stuff. And, you know, if you hear a politician today telling you they're conservative, don't believe them. And Republicans stand for issues. That's what we need to focus on.
So after hearing David say, if a politician tells you they're conservative, don't believe them, the first thing I want to say is, I'm very conservative, okay? And I've never had anybody question whether or not I was conservative. I've never thought of the question the way you've asked the question, but it's an interesting point. I think where it stems from is us, the grassroots, are very conservative, and the people that keep going to Washington, and even some of the people that go to the state, aren't. And we're like, what are you doing? You've campaigned on this, and you've said, great, we're in charge now, we're going to stop Obamacare, and then they haven't done one thing to stop Obamacare. Just to hit on a couple of quick highlights, I think everybody in here probably knows, if they've ever heard of me before, they know my stance on illegal immigration. What you don't know is, you don't know that we cut spending massively at the city level when I was in charge. I never voted to raise taxes. We did a number of conservative things, reduced the unfunded pension liability almost by half, and I've actually done it and enacted conservative measures.
Yes, sir. In this race, one of you's going to win and one will lose. That's just the way it is. And personally, I think it's great that we have two highly qualified candidates that want to step up and take this position that Jim has held so well over the last several years. With that being said, should you be the loser in the election, what changes in your involvement with the GOP and the grassroots movement in Tarrant County be?
If I understand the question correctly, if you lose this race, what changes will you personally have in the GOP? How will I change my involvement? Well, I would say personally, my involvement would not change from this standpoint. I'm going to vote conservatively. I'm going to give money to conservative candidates. I'm going to let my home be used for fundraisers. You know, one of the first things we did when we moved to Tarrant County was let the Northeast Tarrant Tea Party use our home for their fundraiser. We'll continue to do those things. I want to say this about David. You know, politics 101 is don't compliment your opponent. You know, demonize them, make everybody hate them. David has been nothing but nice to me since I've been running. He's been nothing but cooperative, and unless he changes his tune, I don't think you're going to see anything different going on between he and I. I think we work well together and will continue to do so, and if he's elected, I will support him.
Well, you know, that's very unfortunate that you brought that up. Because my answer, which I put together already, I just got to let it play, is that if I don't win this race, I'm going to still do the same thing I've been doing all this time. I'm going to show up at county party headquarters, and I'm going to look at the votes. I'm going to look at the voter registration records. I'm going to put together a walk list for precinct chairs, just like I always have. I'm going to keep doing everything I've ever done. And I believe you when you say you're going to keep doing what you've done, which to this point hasn't really been that much.
Now, wait a minute.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, at the risk of sounding very melodramatic, I think this race is the most important race in the whole country for the next 6 months. Whoever becomes party chair is going to have to hold all these separate factions together, because if they don't, it's going to break up and we'll lose Tarrant County. If we lose Tarrant County, we will lose Texas.
Amen.
And if we lose Texas, we will lose this country. So my question to you, are you willing to accept the responsibility essentially for holding this country together? Because it goes that far, in my opinion.
That's actually
and
quite
that means
profound.
getting all the factions together and cutting out all the strife between the groups.
Amen.
That's good. How close are we to our closing statement? Okay. But yes, I will accept the responsibility that this is the most important election of our lives. If we cannot keep doing what we're doing here in Tarrant County, as Tarrant goes, so goes the state. You know, last time around in the presidential election, we had a 57% vote Republican in Tarrant County. We had a 57% vote statewide. That's because Texas agrees with Tarrant. And so as long as we can keep doing what we're doing, getting out there, knocking those doors, turning out our Republican vote, knowing who they are, having that information available, and doing what we've done, we can keep working and keep doing the good work, and we will lead the rest of Texas. And we will win.
So you bring up a great point, Richard, and that is how important Tarrant County is. So I'm not going to tell you that this is the most important election of our lifetimes. I do believe that the presidential election in 2016 is the most important election of our lifetimes, and you're going to want to have somebody in place in Tarrant County that knows how to win elections and knows how to organize and knows how to motivate people, and I think I'm that guy. So am I willing to take on that responsibility? Absolutely. And it's a responsibility that I take very seriously. I didn't just jump into this race. You know, one day I thought, hey, I think I'll run for Tarrant County chairman. This is something I prayed about. This is something I talked to lots of people about. Every county chair around us and people across the state, multiple people inside Tarrant County, elected officials, and most importantly, my wife. And we made this decision knowing we would be giving it everything we had. And you get me and you get her too, because she'll be very supportive of me working. We will do everything we can to not just keep Tarrant County red, but to make it even redder and help us be more influential across the state.
Last question.
I'm very interested in candidates' spiritual life and family life. I would like to know your relationship with God, Bible, and prayer, and then also your family life, please.
So I'm a Christian first and foremost, above all else. My wife and I are devoted Christians, is how I would describe it. We're members of First Baptist Grapevine. We're active members. We teach, like I think I said earlier in my opening, we teach, if you want to call it teach, the 3-year-olds. There's not much you can teach them. But and then we're moving next Sunday to teach our little girls class, which will be the pre-K class. I was the president of the Christian Legal Society in Dallas. I'm on the National Board of Directors for Christian Legal Society. Faith plays a very important part in my life, and it's kind of funny. I hear people, it's usually on the Democrat side, that say they can separate their faith from their political job. I don't know how, if your faith is true, you can separate them, and I certainly won't.
Okay, we're gonna.
You're gonna help me out there. No, as a little boy, my father was a Southern Baptist preacher, and the books that I got to read were those books in that bookcase, you know, Matthew, Mark, with great big concordances. And I've always had a very strong faith. I'm born again. I'm a Christian. I go to First United Methodist Church, Farmington, and my family life has been that when I left high school, went to college, I eloped and got married to a woman that's been married to her for 24 years. We raised one very beautiful son. And about 10 years ago, we grew to the point where we no longer could stand to be in a room with one another. And for the health of my son, I live a different place now. And he just graduated from the University of Houston with a petroleum engineering degree, so he's doing pretty good. And that's my family life. But I am good with God.
We really are going to wrap it up now. As I said before, I've been in a lot of candidate forums myself, and there's always that question, you wanted to say something more, that ran out of time. I'm going to give both these gentlemen the opportunity to do that. Do you have something you want to follow up on?
So I was sitting there wondering, what am I going to talk about? And then David made it very easy for me. So to say that I haven't been doing anything, well, when I stood up to battle the liberal special interest groups in Farmers Branch, a lot of people would say I did a lot. And I probably got sued 12 times, got deposed for more than 12 hours, had every liberal rag in the country writing about me and writing horrible things about me. People were doing it all over, accusing me of this, accusing me of that, accusing me of taking kickbacks, all sorts of things. So I think what we did in Farmers Branch was pretty important. We were the first governmental entity of any kind to take a vote on an illegal immigration measure. It passed 68 to 32%. So I was fighting the good fight, fighting for conservative principles and values, and in many other ways that I could go on for the next 10 hours about. But I'm proud of what I did. We stood up and fought the ACLU and the likes, and I'll do it again.
And in the interest of decorum, my response to the question of what would you be doing to the Tarrant County Party was intended for what you've done to the Tarrant County Party. I appreciate your positions. Fighting illegal aliens is a great thing. Personally, I don't agree that, those same illegals that we fight, that we need to support reuniting their parents with them at public cost, which is one of the positions that you took after that. But, that's not my position. So I do appreciate your conservative action and your history, and I hope that y'all consider my history of working for the party, and we'll continue to work for the party. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go to closing statements. 2-minute closing, and David, you go.
We talked earlier about how red Tarrant County is. Y'all can all be very proud to live in Tarrant County. A couple of years ago, or during the primaries, they were talking about the Democrats are going to come to Texas, and battleground Texas is going to turn Texas blue. Well, Texas is already blue. Every national election, you hear about how all those counties voted red, and those little blue dots around the country are what make those other states blue. Those urban areas where they don't have very much in the way of rural, most of their population's all urban, so they're blue states. Well, in Texas, most of our geography and half our vote is rural, except for those blue dots that you see along the coast and everything in Dallas and stuff. With the exception that Tarrant is still red along with the rest of the state. If battleground Texas had come with their $30 million in which they lost ground, and they had focused on Tarrant County and put all that $30 million in on Tarrant County and turned Tarrant blue, the whole state would have been blue. That's why this is the most important time for us, because next time by, I think they're going to have that figured out. That's why we need to do what we have done in the past, to lead the state and keep Tarrant red, keep Texas red, and keep doing the right things for the country.
I think we all know how important Tarrant County is. It's vitally important to our state and to our nation. There's no question about it. I think the question is, who do you think is best equipped to be the Tarrant County Republican Party chairman? I think you need someone that knows how to win elections. I have a proven record of doing that. I think you need someone that knows how to raise money. I have a proven record of doing that. When I ran for mayor, I raised more money than my opponent. When I managed the campaigns I managed, we raised more money than them. When I was on the Christian Legal Society, I increased our reserves by 1,500% in 3 years. So that's important. I think you have to know how to deal with the media. So I've probably done close to 2,000 interviews with every media you can imagine, the New York Times, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, Fox News, multiple programs on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. I don't get intimidated by the media. I think I do a pretty good job with it. And you need somebody that knows how to lead. You need, and this is what makes a good leader. Someone that can set a vision, but also someone that can motivate people and inspire people. And one of the best things I did the entire time I was in Farmers Branch, when the illegal immigration stuff first came out, We had hundreds of people come in from all over the Metroplex, want to know how they could help. Well, I organized them, and we motivated them. And in the campaign to vote for the illegal immigration ordinance, for lack of a better term, we got outspent on that 10 to 1, $100,000 to $10,000, and we still won 68 to 32%, and I led that charge. If you will elect me as your Tarrant County Republican Party chairman, I promise you, there will not be a day that goes by that I don't think of how I can improve the party, keep us red, and make us better. And I want to encourage you to sign up when we're done here on my volunteer list or my endorsement list. I would love to have your support, and would love for you to know more about the campaign. And thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for hosting, Ron.
All right, the good news is we have two good candidates for county chair. Give both these guys a hand. And y'all have asked some really good questions. You've been a great audience. Give yourself a hand. Finally, you've had a great moderator here tonight. You don't have to. Thank you all very, very much. Feel free to talk to these guys. However long they will leave.